Yes, I am in contact with my former players, with a number of them. Kvice is one of those players. Yes, we congratulated one another on making it through to the knockout stage. No one knew Kvaratskhelia, or very few people knew Kvaratskhelia before he moved to European football. But now that everyone has been able to admire what he's achieved, he is at the top level of the game. He can play in any team and against any opposition. In terms of the choices of these players that have ability or that go and play in certain leagues, I think that's what he asked. If there is a new generation like the one that you had with Hulk and Witsel at Zenit. Yes, the choice of players going to play over there certainly opens and offers broader horizons for young players. And they do have the same ability. There are a number of players that are pushing very hard. And we need to make sure that we give them enough space to play, because there always will be talents. It's a slightly different brand of football over there. It's less about individual pace and moments. But it's certainly the way of trying to get the highest brand of football over there, because a 1v1 taking on an opposition player or a flash of brilliance is something that can ultimately outdo any sort of game plan.
Hi, I'm from Brazil. Italy has a lot of supporters in my country. My question is, Italy won the World Cup here in 2006. Is it an inspiration for your team? And could you send a message for the Brazilian people who supports your national team, please?
Besides the fact that everyone remembers the moment that we enjoyed here in Berlin when we won the final, on the coach with us, we've got Gigi Buffon, who over the last few days has spoken about that final. He's discussed it with everyone. And he has allowed us to relive all of the excitement that we enjoyed watching back home in 2006. So we know that we have to honor the comparisons with our predecessors, with the 2006 group when they brought home the trophy. That does add pressure. It's a greater responsibility, and so too is the fact that we have fans all over the world, including in Brazil, because they will watch us on television. And even though in the two games against Albania and Croatia we were in the minority in terms of fans in the stadium, we did know that we had all of our fans and supporters driving us on, watching on at home in front of the television. And that's a wonderful feeling. And you can still feel their support and the love that our fans have shown, even if they're not necessarily there with us in the stadium. Luciano, before coming to Germany, you said that you wanted to go home having made the Italian people proud of you. Is this the frontier there? If you make a quarter-final, would the Italian people be proud, or have you not necessarily put a label on it? We don't know. We have to do something a bit better than what we've achieved so far in order to make that come to pass. We were really keen to qualify from the group, because the draw put us in a tough group. And we saw that the players probably struggled with that. I struggled with it a little bit as well. We had to make it through the group. We've done that. And now I expect to see them a little bit more relaxed because we're immediately focusing on a knockout match. You can't think about permutations or considering X, Y, or Z. You can't necessarily think, okay, we can do this, and then that might have an impact on your performance. You have to act. The time is now. Because we can only make it through to the next round if we win this game. Otherwise, we won't be going there. So in order to win the game, that's how we need to play.
Sono qua, Andrea Elefante, Gazzetta dello Sport, una domanda molto più prosaica. Volevo sapere se possiamo aggiornare quelle...
I wanted to know whether we can update the list of penalty takers that you gave us a few days ago. Are they the same names? Are there any newcomers, if you can say to us or not, about the penalty takers?
Il rigorista è quello che riesce in quel momento lì.
A penalty taker is a guy who's able to manage the emotions of that specific moment when it crops up. We've had everyone take penalties on the training ground. But it's not an ideal solution if we're already thinking about that. Of course, this all needs to be a consequence. But if you practice too many penalties, if they all take penalties well because there's no one there, there's no pressure, you need to try and reproduce what the emotion is or the pressure is. You need to try and practice in such a way that it makes it a little bit difficult from an emotional perspective before the players actually take penalties. Because they all take penalties at the end of the training session, and it was wonderful watching them because it feels like they're all perfect penalty takers. But then what happens? You play a training game, and in the training game, you take 2 or 3 in the match. Okay, when the ball goes out of play, rather than a throw-in, you say, okay, take a penalty, and that has an impact on the result, and already you can see how they behave differently. So it's important to have big character. That's absolutely crucial. But we'll do everything in our power to try and win the match. We know that we're up against very awkward customers in the shape of Switzerland. Their results bear witness to that. So far in Euro 2024, there have been teams where no one gave them the chance to actually make it through to the knockout stage, whereas they have then made it through to the round of 16, and deservedly so. And that says a great deal about playing any match in this competition. Good evening. In terms of what we've heard from the interview with the domestic broadcaster, we're expecting a very flexible starting 11 that can deal with any situation. What sort of narrative you expect in terms of the way the game pans out in this knockout match? It's always the same thing. We haven't yet been able to show our best football. Or rather, at times we have, but we haven't been able to sustain that over time. The level of football that we need in order to be ambitious. It's a little bit what I was saying earlier on. I think the fact we made it through to the knockout stage has sorted things out. The fact that we qualified with the last kick of the game, but I think we deserve to make it through, and then maybe we were lucky because the goal came in the final seconds of the game. But in terms of us trying to score that goal, I think we deserve to go through. So maybe we can debate that at a later date.
Dobbiamo renderci conto che non ci possiamo permettere di avere
But we need to realize
cali di tensione
that we can't afford to switch off
all'inizio dei 2 secondi tempi
as we did at the start of the second half in 2 matches or at certain times during games that we've played so far. So the fact that we're now into the heart of the competition because you've made it through the group stage, it now gives you that level that you need to constantly demonstrate because there's no alternative. So from a psychological perspective, in terms of personality, I do expect a bit more compared with what we've shown thus far.
Buonasera, mister Massimo Solari, Corriere del Ticino.
Good evening.
Buonasera. Ascolti, in questi giorni si è, diciamo così, marciato un po' anche sui precedenti fra Svizzera e
Over the
Italia,
last
su quei pareggi che hanno
few
portato la
days,
Svizzera in
we
Qatar,
have
hanno costretto l'Italia
gone over those draws between Italy and Switzerland that led Switzerland to Qatar 2022 and left Italy at home for the second consecutive World Cup. Is that simply something that the media has focused on, or is it a factor
fare leva, ecco, come allenatore di una squadra che magari
that could be leveraged by you? Maybe the team feel they're out for revenge against Switzerland, given you've spoken about emotion.
Si vanno a prendere tutti gli spunti che possono determinare un po' di reazione.
You do try and trigger a reaction in many different ways. You try and stimulate the players. The stadium, the memories of the 2006 World Cup final, Gigi Buffon, who tells us countless stories. As I was saying earlier on, the climax to that game against Croatia, because it felt like a big release in terms of the players' mindset. You know, when they're struggling, when they're waiting for games. That eagerness to try and win matches for the Italian people, for our supporters. Of course, we need to see whether we're able to tap into all of these factors during the game itself, because we'll try and be consummate professionals out there. We're listening to as much as possible from the players in terms of things that could give us a steer in terms of striking the right balance. If you say that these factors do determine a reaction, I think you need that constant level of commitment. You need to show that in terms of shape, organization, in terms of getting a response from the lads. So you're always hammering them, but today nothing, today nothing, today nothing. And then you get to day 5 and you bring it up there. And you see that something has come about because at a certain time the sum of all of those parts, of all of that commitment, means that you can take that step up when you least expect it, or at least that's the only way I know of doing things. In terms of how I coach, I know I need to get up and I need to say what we need to do over the course of the day, that I need to be credible, that it needs to be serious and professional, that gets right to the heart of the matter with the fans, that with the players, so that they can acknowledge it's the right thing to do, that they then develop it in the right way, and then the squad makes the difference, and the squad is perfect from a number of different areas. So then you need to take the next step, which is tomorrow night's game. And then we'll see whether or not this was the time when we're able to then tap in and gather all of that professionalism and all of that organization that we have available to us.
Zwei Fragen aus der Schweiz. Sebastian Rieder, 20 Minuten. Ich warte noch kurz bis, ja. Zwei Fragen gerne. Bei der Analyse der Schweizer Mannschaft, welche Spieler haben Sie da am meisten beeindruckt? Und die zweite Frage, haben Sie den Maulwurf in Ihrem Team gefunden?
Second, have you found the mole that revealed all of these secrets in the previous press conference?
Per quanto riguarda i calciatori della Svizzera, secondo me,
in terms of the Swiss players,
il mio collega, l'allenatore della Svizzera, perché
I think my colleague, the Swiss head coach, is a very good coach because Switzerland set up very well. And they showed against Germany just how much quality they possess in terms of developing their play out there on the pitch. Based on what we've seen, and in terms of what we know about a team that has a lot of strength and ability, Switzerland have got players like Granit Xhaka, who's an important player on the world stage.
Sono tutte cose che fanno parte del livello.
But these are all things that are part of the level that we can display, that we can handle, provided we show our quality. As for the other question, I don't know how to answer that. I apologize. I hope you can give me a helping hand, but I don't know how to answer that question. No, he asked me whether I'd found out who it was that was leaking the information about the team. Good evening. In terms of the last training sessions and what you've seen, do you think Scamacca could suddenly come to life tomorrow? Because we need to score a goal, don't we? I think it's very clear when it comes to Gianluca Scamacca. He's someone who can score a goal at any moment. He's got that quality, that flair. He's got that ability which just leaves you open-mouthed. He's less consistent rather, in terms of the team play. And joking a little bit with him, I jokingly dubbed him as a lazy player, but then I discussed it with him, and he found it quite funny because it's a bit of a game we have between us. But in order for him to showcase his ability consistently, he needs to be consistently part of the team. And he struggles a little bit to do that. Because when we don't have the ball, recognizing where he needs to be to try and win the ball back, he needs to then realize where he needs to be in a position so that if we do regain possession, then... But sometimes it's a little bit useless if you don't win the ball back because you make those runs to shut down the space. But ultimately, it does cover the ground. Come the end of the match, when you actually look at the GPS data, he has done his bit. But he hasn't done so attentively enough, and that does penalise him a bit. But he can pull a rabbit out of a hat at any moment in time, at any stage of the game, because he's got flair, he's got power. There aren't too many players that I've coached that have a shot which is good as Scamacca's. Sometimes when I'm behind the goal line, watch him shoot. If he's shooting towards you, then you don't necessarily actually have time to dodge it, to get out the way of it. But he needs to do so consistently. So we need to have the ball, we need to pass him the ball. He needs to be constantly in a position to receive it. Oh, we'll need to see that. That's the only question mark I have. They smiled at me, they laughed. Try and ask me another question and see if I give you the answer. That's the only question mark I have, because they're two very good players. But we need to assess other factors. They're the same in many ways, because both players will play a role in tomorrow night's game. For too many reasons, they'll both be part of it. It's not that one's that's going to sit on the bench between Gianluca Scamacca and Matteo Retegui. So we need to see which of the two is going to start the game. They both offer us a great deal of options. As I said, they're slightly different in terms of their attributes, but they're both very good players. Good evening. I wanted to ask you, in terms of the defence, there are a few issues there. First and foremost, who's not fit? And have you decided who's going to replace the suspended Riccardo Calafiori? We'll look at Alessandro Bastoni tomorrow morning. Federico Di Marco won't be available for selection. Bastoni needs to be assessed tomorrow because he did a portion of the training session today, but we thought that he might have been able to resolve it, but then he had a bit of a setback. So he's had a few degrees of fever, but then we tried to let him rest up, and he had his first training session there, and he was already a lot better. But we need to see overnight how he responds. And Gianluca Mancini will replace Riccardo Calafiori because he's got the right amount of experience. And you're better off playing with a right-footed player on the right, a left-footed player on the left in situations such as these, with the defence set up as it is, or having that player that also guarantees that he can play with his right foot, but we prefer to go with him for too many reasons because of that. Thank you. Thanks.